that's okay to keep that.
Yeah, I was worried. I wanted to make sure we had the right mics on.
Aaron, are you good?
We're good, thank you.
Oh, okay.
It was
All
just a matter of, sorry.
Okay,
Just a
that's
matter
all
of,
right.
Thank you.
Aaron, you do need to invite Mrs. Meadows.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the Zoom, you should just be able to promote your panelists.
Yes, and I just don't have, I don't know why I can't get my Zoom.
Here you go.
One of the concerns though, I'm just gonna get my, Aaron, what's
Okay, so I'm going to start the video and unmute for now. See what happens. I'll stay here for a minute.
Just stay for 1 minute.
Order.
Are you guys all set? Let me know if there's any feedback.
I'm going to pop up the next. Okay.
Aaron, you're all set. Good evening, welcome to the Hampton Wilbraham Regional School District Planning Subcommittee meeting. It is 5:32 p.m. I see that David Sanders from Wilbraham Public Access is recording. Is there anyone else here recording this meeting? We will do roll call in alphabetical order. John Davenport.
Here.
Terry Goodrich. Sean Kennedy.
Here.
Michelle Boudreau. Here. If you would please stand for the pledge of allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I see that Terry Goodrich is here. Before we begin, thank you so much for being here, taking time on your schedule to be here with us this evening. I would like to start with introductions, so we'll just move around the table, so feel free also if you want to come sit at the table. We'll start with introductions. I'll begin. My name is Michelle Boudreau, and I'm the school committee chair.
I'm Sean Kennedy. I'm the Wilbraham representative from the school committee on this planning committee.
I'm Terry Goodrich. I am also the Wilbraham representative on this committee, and I'm one of the selectmen.
Corinne Roberts, I'm a parent of twins at Green Meadows, and my husband is a teacher at Green Meadows.
If you can, have the, just press the button on the front, just so that the people who are remote can hear.
Hi everyone, I'm Sharon Olberg. I'm the principal of Green Meadows School in Hampton.
Hi, I'm Amanda Whittier. I am a service provider in the school district. I work at Green Meadows, and I'm also a parent of 2 children who attend Green Meadows.
Hi, I'm Jill Minchley. I teach grade 2 at Stony Hill School.
I'm Rebecca Zack. I am a grade 3 teacher at Green Meadows.
And John DeRoche, I'm the principal of Wilbraham Middle School.
Nicole Smith, Associate Principal at Minnetonka Regional High School.
Guys, we have seats up here. You come on up.
Damien Consley, English teacher, Minnetonka High School.
Steve Hale, Principal, Minnetonka.
Monique Dangos, principal at Stony Hill School.
Misty Parsons, School Road School Principal.
Patricia Colquitt, Kindergarten Teacher, Mile Tree School.
Allison Pettit, principal at Mile Tree School.
Gina Roy, Director of Student Services.
Lisa Curtin, Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Professional Learning.
Aaron Osborne, Assistant Superintendent, Finance Operations and Human Resources.
I have my own because I'm a selectman. Board selectman from Hampton.
And I'm John Provost, I'm the superintendent.
So I will turn this over to you.
Okay, I thought it might be helpful for those of us who are joining us tonight, just to get a little bit of history of how we came to this point. As you know, last year the district was involved in a comprehensive strategic planning process, which ultimately culminated in the strategic plan that was adopted by the school committee this October. One of the components of the strategic plan was to study the use of space in the district and to form a committee to maximize the use of space in the district for education. These members, seated before you, were appointed as part of that process to look into those questions. We've had several meetings. I believe we began meeting probably around December. And through that process, tried to establish some goals to guide the work of looking at space in the district. We also toured all the buildings in the district to get a better sense of what space is available and what it looks like currently. And we've also been taking a look at a number of potential reconfigurations that might be available within the district. I think one of the things that was immediately very salient for the members of this committee, we're looking at some of the overcrowding issues that we're experiencing in the Wilbraham schools, particularly at Mile Tree and the middle school, and also to a lesser extent at Stony Hill. And then on the flip side, there's the issue of underutilized capacity in Hampton. We began the process of just sort of, without any constraints at all, looking at all the different potential ways that the district could be reconfigured. I think we came up with 136 different options at that point. However, a lot of them didn't make a lot of educational sense. There were a number, for example, of one grade span schools, so students would only be there for a year, and felt that that was not desirable. In thinking sort of more clearly about the goals for the committee, a couple of things that emerged were to address the overcrowding where it's currently impacting us, and also to try to do something to address the number of transitions that students go through based on our understanding of research about the impacts of transitions on students. Of course, embedded within all that, I think it wasn't exactly explicit, but I'll make it explicit now, was looking towards what would be in the educational best interest of students. And so then trying to narrow down from 136 to a number of more reasonable options, the committee sort of took those three goals that I just described into account. And then also asked me to imagine, okay, so we do have a thing called a regional agreement that we have to deal with. So let's think about what's reasonable within the regional agreement. And it was felt that there might be some reservations about having very young students cross town lines in order to be educated. So I was asked to think about configurations if we didn't do any changes to the regional agreement, if we regionalized 8 through 12, 7 through 12, 6 through 12, and 5 through 12. And the result of that was a memorandum that was a little bit longer than the one you have in front of you that had 16 possible configurations. Within those, a lot of them were duplicates because the more grades you regionalize for, the more options are available to you. But just for the sake of brevity, we took out duplicate options. And we also sort of color-coded this to take into account what goals might be addressed by any of the possible reconfigurations. So the first table takes a look at if we made no changes to the regional agreement, what could be done? And one thing that you could do is move the 8th grade to the high school. That would have the effect of alleviating the overcrowding at the middle school, which is why that cell there that represents the middle school is blue. Anytime we're addressing an overcrowding issue, there's a blue cell there. Saying that, I think I may have forgotten to mention that we noticed a lot of overcrowding at Mile Tree as well, although not many of our solutions actually address that. Next is configurations that become possible if you regionalize in grades 8 through 12. There you see there's another line on the table which is gray as well as blue. Gray means that we're reducing the number of transitions. So in this model, Stony Hill and Sewell Road could become 2 to 5 schools. So there'd be fewer transitions for students in Wilbraham. We also could address overcrowding at Stony Hill as a part of that, which is why that cell is blue as well. So then you see that the process continues on. Regionalizing 7 through 12 really doesn't substantially alter the options that we have on the table. It just limits the grade level or the grade span for Green Meadows. Regionalizing 6 through 12 puts a few more options on the table. And then again, regionalizing 5 through 12 puts some additional options on the table. I will say that we did notice some problems with regionalizing 5 through 12. The real problem becomes the district has to kind of sync up to Green Meadows because you have to have a place to catch the 5th graders that would be coming out. So in that configuration, the 5th graders would go to Sewell Road. One of the sort of downsides to that model is it creates a 1 grade span experience for those 5th graders from Green Meadows. So, they'd have 1 through 4 in Hamden, and then come to Sewell Road for just a year, and then they'd be, I'm sorry, take that back. There was another model that looked like that, but we took that off the table because it had that 1 grade span issue. But as a consequence, what happened is we had to move the 5th grade into the middle school, and that reintroduces the problem of overcrowding. It just makes the overcrowding problem go from grades 6 through 8 being jammed into the middle school to 5 through 7 being jammed in the middle school. So there is a problem with that. So at this point, and there may be other options that are available, although I think we've been pretty wide-ranging in our imaginations. But I think if you think about if we're only able to regionalize at these upper grade levels, I think this is pretty much the universe of possibilities we're looking at. And so at this point, we wanted to get some feedback from school staff on your thoughts about these possible reconfigurations.
I mean, at the end of the day, you know far more than we do about what's best for the students, and what's best for you as teachers. So I thought it was really important to hear what you had to say, so please don't hold back.
You can raise your hand if you like.
Please. It's right in the front where it says push.
Sure. So I'm not school staff. Well, I work in student services, but I'm not a teacher. But can I just ask, are we looking to implement this for the 2023-2024 school year, or is this something?
No, it would be too early for 2023, 2024. We've already decided the budget on that. This would be for after that.
How far after that are we?
Depends on how fast we get things going. If everyone's agreeing on certain options, and this goes through, and the town's pass everything like that, and everyone likes the option, it can be done faster. Why do you ask about the time?
I just think that the district has been in a period of stagnation for about 6 years now, and to add another year onto that timetable, it's just, I don't know, I feel like we could do something sooner. If perhaps we have an option here. If I'm looking at all these options, it looks like 8 through 12 is going to be the option at the high school, and you have an option here right on the first page that requires no change to the regional agreement. So this doesn't really require towns to vote on anything. And I think the high school, from what I understand, has a huge, it's hugely underutilized. WMS is utilizing, I may be wrong, but almost room closets, I think, as classrooms. So why would we not look to do something immediately to reduce an overcrowding issue?
The reason why, I think, oh, sure, John, go ahead.
Sure, I can respond to that. I think that any of these options are going to take some study and some planning. I think that where we are in the school year right now, things are going to wind up very quickly, and I don't think we would have time to do this the way we want to do it for September, and that would be the reason why. I also think that if we are going to do one as sort of a mid-stage to get into another, we should know what the final stage is and not just do it piecemeal.
And I'd also throw in that we had pitched at one point putting 7th and 8th at Minichog, and it was resoundingly defeated in at the town meeting. So just putting 8 up there without having it out there for the town to talk about, to express, to make sure everyone's on board, it's not something I think should happen. And by the way, I don't think the district has been stagnant. I think it's a little strongly used word. I think the teachers and the education in our district is really good, and hopefully we can make it a lot better with these changes.
And just one more comment. I think if we're working together on approval from both towns, I think that's something that's just never going to happen. And I think in general, with anything that you're looking to get, like overwhelming approval, it's going to be a very difficult task when you have parents, teachers, and administration and all different opinions. So I think that's an obstacle that if that's a necessity, then we may be in the state we're in for quite some time.
We had a strategic plan, and the part of the strategic plan was that people from both sides, both towns, were there, and they said this is what they wanted us to do, put a plan together, and then come up with people from Wilbraham, from Hamden, and see what we came up with, and to get people involved in that decision making. And by the way, this committee has been, we've had not a lot of issues. We've been in agreement on almost everything that we've been talking about. So that's a good sign, and I don't think it's going to be years. But maybe a year from now, you can sit there and you can say, Kennedy, I told you so. All right? And I would love to be able to say the vice versa, I told you so. So let's see what happens. Someone raised their hand. Nikki? Yeah, just pass it over to her. Make sure it's so that, yeah, you know, it's the bottom where it says press.
Thank you. Just as a small response, just to make sure that language is consistent with regard to a comment that was made about having grossly underutilized space at the high school. I would argue that that's not the case. There's some space, yes. We take in more students, absolutely, but I wouldn't want the conversation, both as a parent of students in the district and as someone who works for the district, I wouldn't want there to be some conversation that there's just that much space that's out there. Also, my second comment would be that it takes time to plan, as Dr. Provost was saying, to do an appropriate transition. Bringing the 8th grade into the high school requires a lot of planning on a lot of different levels to make sure that those very young students coming into a high school setting would be appropriately prepared, as would their families, for the environment. So that's just all I wanted to say. Thank you.
While we're talking about the
Can someone pass them one of the microphones?
While we're talking about the high school, I guess I would pose it as an issue and maybe also a question in terms of looking at the space in the Minichog building in terms of square feet and then the number of bodies per square feet versus thinking about the space functionally, and to what extent your committee has looked into, or in your tour of the building, you put thought into to what extent it would just be all, 8 through 12 intermingling in one building, or would parts of the building be sequestered in certain ways, and just that, kind of the functional use of the building is different than just physical capacity of it.
Which one do you prefer?
I don't know.
I mean, as an educator in high school, I was getting the perception for people, and I'm just speaking for myself here, that they wanted the 8th graders to be kept separate from the high school. Is that what people are thinking, or are people thinking, no, we can put them all together?
I'm not a teacher in the school district, but I am a parent of a student who would probably be in 8th grade when this would be implemented.
Right.
And I guess my top preference would be that my student would be in a middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th, or 7th, 8th, and not inside of Minnetonka High School. But if that were to happen, I think a very much separate setting would be appropriate. Currently, middle school students at Wilbraham Middle School have a recess opportunity, which I know is it seems like maybe a small item, but I think hanging on to that, that social piece, that of recess, of lunch, of being with peers that are in that age bracket up to 14 feels appropriate. I have a 7th and 8th grader. My 7th grader was heading to Minnetonka High School next year and was going to be mingling with 9 through 12. I would be a little bit worried about that, but my 8th grader that's ready to go next year has a maturity that I feel like is appropriate. So I would absolutely, my perspective is absolutely separate. If not in this building, in a separate whole building would be the best way to do it.
Do you think educationally there is an effect negatively on having, let's say, if it works, if we choose any of these options, that's saying having Wilbraham Middle School end at 7 and then Minnetonka at 8, let's say they have their own section of the building. I'm just saying this is hypothetical, but having the middle school split between 2 different buildings, is there anything educationally, any educational deficits that we would have for the 8th graders?
Are you talking about the access they would have to different teachers and different courses? Because I think right now, although they're in the same building, for the most part, they exist as 8th grade, 7th grade, and 6th grade. There's 2 teams in each grade, and they function that way. They're not intermingling with other grades really at any point throughout the day.
And do they share teachers?
They share related arts teachers.
Okay, related arts.
There's no core academic teachers. Those are all based on the grades.
Okay. Anyone else?
Are we on that question?
Sure, please. Yeah.
Actually, and also can I address Damien's question before? So I want you to know that we have been considering this in terms of what the potential impacts on the building would be, and not just as a student per square foot formula. That has been a big part of my conversations with Principal Hale, because I think you could, in fact, history has shown, you could accommodate a much larger number of students in 9 through 12 than you could in 8 through 12. Because having a separate grade is going to cause us to use space less efficiently, because you have to accommodate those students in ways that you don't necessarily have to accommodate 9th graders. For example, there are some courses that 9th graders can take with 11th, 12th graders, etc. That would not be the case with 8th graders. And so that's why the building would not still be able to run at the efficiency it was originally designed for, and is why we think 8th grade is really the limit of what could be put in high school. To your question, one of the things we've been looking at, or I've been talking about, and I've been looking at more closely since our last discussion, is the impact on transitions. And my best reading of the research out there is transition has a negative effect wherever it occurs. So I think it's likely that we'll see 8th graders experience a number of impacts that 9th graders currently experience as part of their transition. It would happen a year earlier. I will note there is, just because MCAS is something that we have to bear in mind, 8th grade is a tested year, 9th grade is not a tested year, so there might be a hit on MCAS scores there. But I think that sort of the question or the concern for me is I read research is not so much having 8th grade with 9 through 12 as whatever year the transition occurs is where you'll see a negative impact on kids.
So, go through the list and pick out the worst options. I'll give you a task right now. Go through the list and pick out the worst options in review as educators.
I'll just say, looking at these options of being a staff member at Green Meadows, but also having a child that is approaching middle school age in the next 2 years, my concern is that there are still 5 options that have a middle school in Wilbraham and a middle school in Hampton, and to me that still doesn't seem that it's equitable. Working at Green Meadows, I've seen what the middle school is like, and I know it's not like the middle school in Wilbraham, and I want better for all children and my own child. So that's a concern for me, still having many middle school options at Green Meadows.
And those grade levels would be 7, 8?
6, 7, and 8.
So to clarify, that would be a vote for 9 or 10, is that correct? As we have the numbers?
Or 7? 7, 8, 9, or 10.
I'm sorry, 7, 8, 9, or 10.
That's it. We're good enough. That's it.
I was at Green Meadows when it was pre-K through 4, and then when it was pre-K through 5, and then when it turned into pre-K through middle school. So we've had a lot of transitions over the past several years, and I've just seen the impact of what it's like to be in that type of situation.
And that would require a change to the regional agreement. It'd be a difficult task, but I would tell you as a school committee member for 12 years when you probably weren't even born, and working in the legislature for 30 years and in the Senate for 30 years in Washington, D.C., difficult tasks could be done if people are presented the proper information of what it's about and why it's about and who it benefits. So I don't give up on changing a regional agreement if that's needed, if it's best for the kids. So.
I think I would just want to speak up at this point too. So like Mrs. Whittier, I have also been at Green Meadows when it was a pre-K to 4 building, a pre-K to 5 building, and then a pre-K to 8 building. The staff at Green Meadows have done a tremendous job trying to make the best environment possible for students academically and socially. When we first had the middle school start at Green Meadows, the number of students was a lot greater than it is now. And over time, the number of students that stay versus the number of students that choose to go to Wilbraham Middle School has changed. And so if we are to continue to have a middle school, we do need to know that we have enough students at a particular grade level. That is not the case this year. We have a class now, a grade level class that has very few students. Probably far too few to actually call them a class and feel as though they're getting the experience that they really should have. We've tried to do something so that we can, mingle that class with another class, but it makes it really, really challenging. I think Green Meadows will do the best job they can to try to make the experience the best experience possible, whatever the grade level, but we do have to have enough students at that particular grade level to make sure it feels like a class. And, over time that has changed. And so I would just give thought to that. My guess is the planning committee does know kind of what those numbers look like. So that's one of the things that I would say to just give some consideration to.
Another thing I would add to that is that if you're looking to still retain the middle school at Green Meadows, is that if you're going to have special education programs available at WMS, they should be available at Green Meadows. So we're Wilbraham residents, and my sons have been at Green Meadows now for 8.5 years, because when they entered the school district, the program didn't even exist in Wilbraham. And so if they are going to have this as a model for system, it needs to be equitable for both, neurotypical students as well as those receiving special education services.
So I have the unique experience of having been here during the transition 12 years ago, so I was at Sewell Road for about 10 years, and it was a 2 to 6 building. And so Corinne, to speak to your point about wanting to do it quickly, we found out at this time, we found out in March that we were moving in June, and that was like a really fast turnaround, I think, not just for students, but for families as well. So I do appreciate having an opportunity to prepare for whatever that change might be. So I actually have the experience of being a neighborhood school, and I know we're not calling these 2 to 5 schools neighborhood schools, but for all intents and purposes, that's what they are. You're going to have to block off whoever's going to Stony Hill and whoever's going to Sewell Road. There's going to have to be divisions made and bus schedules created. So whether you're going to the one that you live closest to or not, that's going to happen. So some of the things that I found when we were like that was I loved being able to see Mrs. Dowding's children go from 2nd to 3rd to 4th to 5th to 6th, and the community, the families being involved. It was really incredible, no doubt about that. But when we got told we were going to Stony, we were like, great, gonna miss these people, but now I get to teach with Jess Paris, and now I get to teach with Monique Danglis. There was all these 2nd grade teachers that I have been at meetings with, 3 or 4 times a year, but now the collaboration was there. And I think over the past 12 years, we at Stony Hill, I can only speak for us, we have built in both 2nd and 3rd grades these incredibly strong teams that are more like family. And I don't have just 2 teammates to talk to, I have 6 other teammates to talk to. We share ideas, we share strategies, we share our students, and I just think that that's such a valuable experience. And I've had it both ways. And I told Mr. Gannon a few years ago, he asked me what I would do, and I said, my ideal school is what they just did in Ludlow, which would be to have be a 2 to 5 building where you have all grade levels. Well, we can't have that here. So I know that it has to be this decision, and I do understand transitions. When I look at most of these plans, the ones where we're reducing transitions, it looks like it's primarily for the Wilbraham students, and it looks like we eliminate just one transition. So what I would say to that too is my son was entering 2nd grade when we were reorganizing. And prior to finding out 3 months before that we were reorganizing, it was all his best buddy was going to go to Memorial. All of his best friends were going to go there. And it was that anxiety for him, right? And then all of a sudden that lifted. And he got to be with his peers from preschool, and he never got separated from them. they transition together between each building. And I just think socially and emotionally, like that was a huge impact. Like I think until you're the parent who experiences that, because before when I was a teacher, I was like, yeah, so your buddy's over there at Memorial, your buddy's over there at Stony Hill. I think that we have to consider how much of an academic impact students' social and emotional well-being is. And to know that your best buddy is across town and you can only see them at soccer on the weekend, like that's huge for them. Just like it's huge for the middle schoolers to be able to have that small recess time they have. It's huge for our kids to never be separated. They're never separated right now. They move together in those transitions. And then they're not having this whole like, oh, we've got to come together at middle school. Because I remember that was a huge thing when we were neighborhood schools too, which was like, oh, the Sewell Road, the Stony Hill, and the Memorial kids all had to come together. And that was, and John was probably there at that time too, that was a piece of that adjustment time too. So that, I think that has to be considered when we're thinking about, okay, so reducing transitions, I can totally appreciate that and the studies around that, but I'm also like, we've only reduced one, but then we've created this other division. This division between the colleagues, which I do think strengthens. I think having special educators that are second and third grade special educators who know those curriculums inside and out, and those teachers in that developmental stage, and I'm sure that's what they find at, you know, in fourth and fifth grade, but I just think there's benefits to both. I've had experience in both, and so I just hope whatever change we make is really in the best interest of all the children, and that we've looked at the numbers going forward. That we're not just preparing for whatever kids we have enrolled right now, because the numbers will change too. I had classes of 24 at Sewell Road, and we tease our colleagues at Memorial. There was a year we had 24, 25 kids, and they had 15. We always talk about that. They don't like when we bring that up because it's like our teasing moment, but when you divide and you don't use your flex zones, that also impacts it. So keeping class sizes the same, I think, is really important. So just, I think I have this perspective that I know a lot of the educators do, but I happen to be one of the people who was a neighborhood school for a decade and then got moved and has been a grade level school for the last decade plus. So I just think that there's positives to both sides, but I want to make sure if we make this big move that it makes sense. I think that it's for like the long term, and we've looked at it, you know.
And especially when you look at it, like the older I get, you know, 2 years, oh my gosh, it's such a short period of time, right? But for my son, who's in 5th grade at Sewell Road, 20% of his life, he's been at one school. It doesn't seem like a short period of time. You know, 2 years is like 1/1,000,000th of my lifetime, so, right? But for him, it's like a long period of time. So I don't think they see time as like we see it. And I do appreciate it. And that's something that always stuck with me. Like, I thought it was good, like having all the kindergartners together, right? And then you have all the resources. And if you have any questions or you need, you know, you have everyone right there and you're talking. And I don't know, I just always felt that was really important as well. And then with the neighborhood schools, I get it, but then exactly what you said is the problem we have in Hamden. We have the children grow up in Hamden, and then they come and they meet up here, and they haven't been with everyone their whole lives, right? And maybe they've seen like baseball, because I know baseball shares and soccer and stuff like that, but you don't have the kids together with you and have developed that safety, you know, that love, whatever you want to. So I was always leaning more towards this, but can anyone tell me, like, am I wrong in looking at this? Is it better to have these neighborhood schools? I mean, I guess I heard Jill speak, you know, for this. Am I missing something?
So one of the things that we did encounter, I was also part of that process. So things that I heard from Jill as well as people in the past was, again, that inequity of class sizes, because if you have one neighborhood that is heavy in children and one neighborhood that's not, again, you're going to have that unevenness in class size. But also the other thing is having your child not being able to experience the diversity of the children in Wilbraham. So if you're in a neighborhood school and you're always seeing the same children in your neighborhood, unless you are able to be in sports or some kind of outside curricular activity, you're not going to encounter who else is in Wilbraham. So they're, having your grade levels together, all the Ks together, all the ones together, et cetera, gives them the opportunity to experience the diversity in Wilbraham as well as being able to look at those class sizes and make sure there's equity, there as well.
Thank you.
Here's a question. How many of you went as children to a neighborhood school? Raise your hand. And so the rest, so a little bit, I'm going to say maybe a little bit more neighborhood school than less, almost equal. Just curious to see what that was.
So one more thing I want to say on that, Patty, helped me remember it, was that not just the diversity for the students for who they're socially going to interact with, but when you have 7 classrooms where you're remixing kids every year, you're creating a different classroom chemistry. And so, sometimes you just need that. And when you only have 2 sections, as I'm sure they find at Green Meadows, or 3 sections, it's a little harder to mix them. The first year you can mix them, and then the second year you mix them a little more, but by the 3rd year you're just recreating what already happened. And so giving them different experiences and different, peers from which they can learn and interact. I think that has been one of the positives that I've seen in recent years.
One question. Since we don't have an unlimited budget, right? We do have a budget that we have to stay within. Are some of these options more expensive than other options? Has that been taken into account?
Sure. When we get down to a smaller number of options that we're considering, we'll have to really sharpen the pencil around that. My guess is that options that reopen TWB will probably be the most expensive, because I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get that building ready for students.
What about from a staffing perspective? Wouldn't some of these options be less expensive than some of the other options? I would think where some of the options where you have many grades together, particularly for related service providers and such, would you be able to potentially reduce the number we have, or is there any change to that, to the staffing needs?
I think there might be some efficiencies in terms of related services staff. However, all of the models are essentially going to require the same number of classroom teachers. It's just a matter of what building they're working from. So I don't think that there's a tremendous amount of personnel savings on any of them. Even one where, say, Stony Hill is closed number 10, you would say that there would be savings of administration, nursing, et cetera, from the building being closed, but that requires you to open GWB. So you'd be recreating those positions in the other building.
I do actually. Curriculum-wise, there's really no difference, right? It doesn't matter. Yeah.
What do you mean by there's no difference?
No. I mean, it's like whether we do neighborhood schools or we do, the all grades in. It doesn't affect the curriculum in any way, right?
We're still going to be working towards vertical and horizontal alignment, no matter how we divide it.
Right. Yeah.
Just one small consideration.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And so I see benefits to both, like Jill was saying, so this isn't, meant to, I'm just funneling down to the question you just asked about curriculum. I do notice, just because with Green Meadows, when we have a grade 2 meeting on curriculum, it's tough because, you know, I'm wondering, is Sharon also able to share the same exact message with her second grade teachers or her third grade teachers? So I do see, you know, that there's a thing to consider there, that it does make it a little more challenging when you don't. I'm blessed to have all the teachers, 7 teachers for each grade level that I can give the same message to. They can collaborate, it can be consistent. But we do notice, even with coaches and CPT, curriculum planning times and all that, sometimes you can't help it. Sometimes the message is a little different. The work is a little different. The questions that a teacher might ask and the answer they might get from the principal or a coach aren't going to be identical. So I think that, you know, big picture, it is one plus to having the whole grade level as much together as you can. Sharon and I obviously collaborate a lot to make sure that we stay on the same step. But that is one truth about having all the teachers for a grade level together in regard to curriculum.
And then social emotional, with, let's say, like, look at option number 7 and option, let's just say 7 and 8, just to compare. Those grouping of grades, there's no issues with any of that, or are there any positives, negatives? Other than what was already just expressed.
Well, Sean, I think the positives kind of connect to a lot of what some people were saying. It speaks to Sharon's, Corinne's concern about that middle school in Green Meadows. And so, you know, 7 and 8 keep Green Meadows as a pre-K to 5, and kind of similar to the Wilbraham schools. And it creates a learning environment that is not crowded at the middle school, and really lets them spread out, I mean, we're thinking about what is, you know, in the educational best interest of our students, you know, that having enough space and having the middle schoolers kind of all together in our regional district, having a similar experience and opportunities to prepare them for the high school. I think that's important. And so looking at 7 and 8, I'm kind of like pausing on those and thinking about, you know, I understand that there can be learning loss or challenges for students when they transition, especially if they're transitioning frequently. But then there's also the benefit of having a group of teachers together that can collaborate. So that's, I've got, you know, kind of 2 sides of that. If we had more buildings that had 2 through 5, we would just have to have a different plan on how we're collaborating and what does that look like across. And our elementary principals team is working all the time to coordinate around curriculum and instruction. So we just have to adjust the plan to make that, you know, kind of get ahead of what Monique's point was.
Thank you.
So if this was the decision-making body that was in charge right now, I'm feeling like number 7 would be a really strong option. However, I want to just put this on the table because I am still thinking about some of the overcrowding that I saw at Stony Hill. When we look at our NASDAQ projections for enrollment, we're probably at the bottom of what our enrollment is going to be, and it's going to start growing again, modestly, not an explosion. And it'll start growing in the earlier grades before it goes to the higher grades. So I'm wondering, knowing that, at least from my perspective, Stony Hill is already in an overcrowded position right now, how many more students do you think it would take to reach the tipping point where you say, we got to go with a different model rather than having all the 2nd and 3rd graders here?
Wouldn't it also be an option to have, and I grant we haven't talked about it, and we haven't talked about it with the regional agreement, but based on that question, if Stony Hill is too crowded, we could take the 2nd and 3rd graders and have them go to Green Meadows for those who live geographically closer. Again, if there were no town line constraints under the regional agreement.
Right, the reason that's not on here is because earlier we had thought that going below grade 6 would not be palatable. But if going below grade 6 is palatable, we can have a lot more options.
Just curious, I have no idea, so I'm just asking this question point blank. So what would busing look like at that point? And what would that increase in cost if we're, you know, moving children, you know, more children from younger grades across either line? Like, what does that up the cost for busing, and what does that look like?
The only way to answer that question is to have them populate, when I say them, have LVPEC populate the system with addresses and deliveries and figure out where students would be. My guess is that if you got more than 3 grades moving across town lines, you probably would have some increased cost. We essentially have 3 grades moving across, well, actually we should take that back. We have 7 grades moving across town lines now. If you went more than 7 grades, there probably would be some increased cost, but to know for sure, you really have to run the simulation.
Can I just make another comment? So if you're focusing on number 7 and number 8, I guess I would say I would be more in favor of 9 and 10, reopening TWD. I think just going back to the whatever 5, 6 years ago when, you know, the Green Meadows Middle School came into play, I think, and you know, I don't know all the details of it, but I do think you would have a lot more folks on the Camden side that would be amenable to a change in the regional agreement that reopened the school and had them having 2 schools as opposed to just 1 school in their town.
I think the issue with that is the size of Green Meadows. I think Green Meadows can do, I hope I'm looking at these right, I have 319. No, current, no, I'm sorry, hang on. TWB, here we go. The maximum capacity is 450 in Wilbraham Middle School. The maximum capacity is 525. So it's 125 student difference between the 2 buildings.
I'm sorry, you said it? Yeah.
Yeah. The maximum capacity of TWB is 450 students, and they are on septic, they're not on sewer. And then Wilbraham Middle School is 525 students, so that's 75 more, sorry. And then if you look at the way it's split right now, the 80-20, it kind of works out that there's a school in Hamden with 20% of the students, and then the 4 other schools in Wilbraham. So equitably, as you had talked about before.
Right, but you have to get folks to agree to that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do recall that it's not
So to comment on that, what if kids from Wilbraham could choose to go to Green Meadows? So for elementary school, so any of the lower grades could choose to go to that environment and that school. So it would be an option, much like Hamden kids can choose to come to WMS. Folks could choose to send their kids from Wilbraham to Green Meadows. So that's something that you could, you know, have that as an option. I think a lot of parents would key up on that.
I live in Wilbraham, my kids have been at Green Meadows for years.
Exactly.
And we had the option, they love it there, it's a great small school.
I think if more folks knew that and actually went and physically looked at that school and the environment, they may, you know, agree with you. Yeah. But I don't think most people even know that's an option.
Just to clarify, that currently is an option?
But I don't think most people know that's an option. You know, I don't think people in town know that. Because I've talked with many people, bombarded me with questions about all of this, and no one knows that's an option, I'll tell you right now. So I don't know how you get it out there, but you did, you sought it out, right? You have a petition, or you?
No, my kids have special needs, and there wasn't an option to send
Okay. So that's a different predicament. So otherwise, you would not have even known that.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a question that came in.
That I will read. So the 8th grade currently follows a middle school model, 8 periods of 45 minutes. Their day is geared towards goals for 8th grade kids, including their electives. Coming into the high school is a huge change. 4 85-minute classes, no recess, mixed ages, etc. How would an 8th grader's day go?
I think that's one of the questions that leads me to say that we can't do this for September. I don't think that the 8th grade would necessarily have to follow the 9 through 12 block schedule, though. It might be a different schedule than what they currently have at the middle school, but this doesn't necessarily have to mirror the high school schedule. That would be something that we would spend next year working on if we got an indication that that's the direction we're heading in.
So I think you kind of noticed that we're trying to get a feel for where everyone wants to go so we can limit our options, so then we can go and look at it and find out what's the cost emotionally, socially, financially, for the students, for the teachers, for the community. So that's why we wanted to meet, and you're the first group that we've met with as a committee, because you're our first responders on the students. You're right there. So please, so if you have anything you're worried about saying, please bring it up or call us afterwards.
Or find us in the produce aisle at Big Y.
Can I make one more comment?
Please, yeah.
My husband's probably going to crawl under a rock after tonight and go like.
No, it's good. I appreciate it.
I think just going back to the middle school at Green Meadows, I think one thing, just seeing my kids, that they're now 5th graders and they're going to be, we've made the decision, we're sending them to WMS next year. It's caused a lot of unnecessary anxiety for them to even have 2 options. They both have special needs, and it's just been really challenging trying to field the questions of, they hear from other students, well, you can't go to Wilbraham Meadow, you have to stay here, and they aren't quite understanding like why we're sending them one place. Some of their friends are staying somewhere else, and I think having a unified middle school would just really be, from a social emotional standpoint, would really be in the best interest of our student body, particularly when we have one that has, say, 200 kids and another that I think this year probably has under 10 in one of the grades, as Sharon alluded to, and it's the opportunities there for not just academics, but pure role models. Those opportunities don't exist when you have a middle school that has maybe 30, 40 students and another middle school that has 200. And I think we have one of my sons is on the higher functioning side, and it's been causing him a great deal of stress, and we deal with it every single day. And if everybody in his school was just going to WMS, because that's where the district sent middle schoolers, because I think that, and maybe I'm wrong, I think it's the only really place where we have like an option to send your kids to 2 different schools. I think we did say we could do it at the elementary level, but it's, kids talk about it, and if they're vocal about it, and it's just, it's probably something that if we could eliminate that, it probably would be in the best interest of our students.
I will say that someone did mention this to me. Whatever we do regarding the middle school, we need to come up with a name that represents both towns. If it's going to be a Hamden-Wilbraham Middle School, then we need to come up with a Minnetonka version of the middle school. So that's something that I think we need to think about. And it's been mentioned to me, and so I just want to put that out there now so it's on everyone's mind. But it needs to be a name that represents both towns. So,
just to put in for 6th through 8th at Green Meadows now, I have numbers from February 1st. I have 37 students total. Is that roughly 4, 14, and 19? 36.
and that's for grades 6, 7, 8?
Here's my age. Thank you.
You can read that?
Yeah.
I got some. Goodness.
So could I just say that the wisdom I hear coming from this group right now is really three things. One, that it would be important to get the middle school out of Hamden. Two, that if 8th grade goes to the high school, we need to make sure that it is, it maintains its 8th grade character and identity unique from the high school. And that we need to be really careful about weighing the benefits of smaller grade span schools that serve all of the students in Wilbraham versus larger grade span schools where we'd have to divide the students in Wilbraham. Is that correct? Am I missing anything?
I just want to, you had just mentioned previously that the enrollment, you know, is trending to increase ever so slightly, and that would obviously start in preschool or kindergarten. And currently, Mile Tree configuration as a pre-K through 1 building, we're pretty tight in there. It wouldn't take much more than maybe 15 students to push us into probably needing a second or an additional classroom, which would put art or science or music on a cart and kind of get them out of their room. And so most of these options keep Mile Tree at pre-K through 1st grade, but the space is absolutely tight, and if enrollment starts to increase, there is that, you know, that space piece to consider for Mile Tree.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Regarding the point about the significant thought, if 8th grade were brought into this building, I also think that process really needs to be fleshed out. And for people to make an informed decision, they need to know the details of how this would change for the 9 through 12 experience, what it would be like for the grade 8 experience, you know, and not in terms of a level of abstraction and generalities. You know, so I mean, I think that, you know, even though it's doing planning for something that might not come to pass, we really need to know what it looks like and what the experience is going to be like for students.
I totally agree with you on that, to the point where, I mean, open house, like here are the classrooms, here's where the students are going to be, here's where they're going to have lunch, here's how the periods are going to go, like really like in the detail, really flushing it out. Because then when you present that to the parents and you're saying, just to say, hey, we got it, you know, okay, I don't care how much I trust you. If I trust you 100%, you say you got it, and I'm like, okay, but still but if you're saying, we got it, and look, oh wow, you really do got it. This is great. Okay, I don't have to worry about it.
It shouldn't be a decision where we make a decision and then kind of say, yeah, we'll figure it out, we'll make it work.
Right.
It needs to be, this is what the decision would really look like.
Exactly, yeah. Really flush it out.
Here's another question for you all. Who went to a high school that had the 4-block period like Minnetonka? So the rest of you had the typical 50-minute or whatever it is, 45-minute class.
Yeah.
So John, I know you and I had talked about this. If we had 8th graders in the high school, let's say you have 8th graders that want to take freshman Spanish or freshman French, but now they can't because they're on a different block schedule than the high school students. So that would eliminate them from any advanced class, any advanced language, or even a robotics class, or something where someone could excel at that and be exposed to it in a good way in the high school setting. They would not be able to do that. So do you see or anticipate, or would you entertain talking to parents and seeing if they would like to switch? I mean, I can't even imagine how it would be done. But I know you and I had talked about it, to switch from this, I'll call it a horrible 4-block schedule that I think was awful for my kids personally, to where you get to have, I mean, who can sit for, what is it, how long is a class? Yeah, who can sit that long? I can't. And how do you expect a 15-year-old kid to sit that long in a class? You lose them, 10 minutes in. I just think that they don't get as many opportunities for electives. for trying out different classes, different things that they think they might like, but they don't want to commit to because you have such a limited choice with that schedule. There's so many things to look at with the high school setting. If we bring 8th graders in, we could expand their horizons so much and open them up to some of these classes. I know we talked about that robotics class, which I think is just amazing, and I think you get a lot of kids, younger kids interested, along with the languages. So just a thought on that. I think if you asked parents and sent out a poll, you'd find most of them did not do a 4-block schedule like this.
So to just answer the question, I think it's very important that we talk to parents. That'll be another group that I think that we need to speak to. As part of this strategic plan, there is something in there to take a look at block scheduling at the high school. I can just sort of share my standard response around that. Certainly something I've been asked many times throughout my career, not just here, but in other places. So if you look at the research around block scheduling, you'll find that the studies show anything from a very modest improvement on student achievement from being in the block schedule to a very modest decline for students being on the block schedule, with a lot showing there's no difference. So I think in terms of the impact for kids, it's even, it's a wash. So then you ask, so why are more than 70% of the high schools in the country on the block now? And it's because it's less costly. It really was around trying to run schools more efficiently. So certainly, we will take a look at it, and if there is a desire that's widespread to move to a more traditional schedule, we can do that. But we will need substantial resources from the towns in order to go to a traditional schedule, because it is more costly.
And I thought I heard somewhere too that the block schedule, you get, I think at the end of the day, without students moving from class to class, whatever, it's like 2-3 weeks more of school year of classroom instruction. Is it something like that? Steve, am I?
What we're doing is you're adding the transition time into the loss of learning.
Right.
You're also in a 4x4 block, you can take 32 classes versus 28 classes in a 7-period schedule. So over the course of your career, you have the opportunity to take 4 more classes. The feedback, we've done multiple surveys to alumni in the past. Those going on to colleges and universities really appreciate the block schedule because it helped prepare them for the longer classes at the college and university level. But there's no perfect schedule. If there was a perfect schedule, everyone would be in it. I think the other thing that I wanted to comment on is I think we have amazing educators at the 8th grade level and here at the high school, and we can do anything. We can do anything. But to take 10 classrooms and dedicate them solely to 8th grade in a facility that was not designed for that is going to be challenging. We have one cafeteria of 415 students. They're going to be on the same buses. There's no way to contain 8th grade in one section of the building. Plus the impact, we have 63 instructional spaces that are not specifically designed as for particular content. So now you're dropping that down to 53. And if you drop that down to 53 and you can't fit all the classes in there, then it starts to impact your program of studies and offerings because you have to close down some of those specially designed rooms for generalized classroom space. So we can do anything, but it would be a challenge to go into this with a utopian view that the 8th grade will be in a self-contained unit. They won't see an 18-year-old during the day. Like, they're going to be in the mix.
Just one last thing on this, and I appreciate you hearkening back, like, this is how I went to school, or how did we go to school. I would hope that we would come up with an option that's so drastically different than how we did it, because we've learned with all these years of education on how to do it better and better. Unfortunately, I think we keep on getting hit with a financial ceiling that's not really letting the best option come forward, because that's just the reality, money. But I agree with Steve. You have done an amazing job. I said it at the beginning, I'll say it again now, and we just want to have it so that we can just make it that much better, if possible. And we've come with no preconceived notions on this, and that's why we wanted to hear what you had to say.
I just want to make a comment on number 7.
Number 7 is actually my favorite option. It's the only one that doesn't address the population issues at Mile Tree. Mile Tree is overcrowded, but I just wanted to put out there for consideration that we're not bound by the regional agreement for pre-K. So with the additional space that we have at Green Meadows, we have 2 preschool classrooms currently in the Mile Tree building, and if we needed to alleviate the space issue, we could always move 1 classroom or 2 classrooms and have a consolidated preschool program at Green Meadows, because we certainly would have the space there if we eliminated the middle school. So just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. Good idea.
Does anyone have any other comments or questions?
Comment, sure. I just want to thank everyone for your input. You know, this is a really important decision for the district, and it's critical for us to get it right, in my view, and I think the only way to do that is by really gathering as much information from people who will be impacted by the decision as possible. So I thank you for everything you've shared. I think, in my mind, you sort of helped to further restrict the universe of options, and so this has been a super helpful meeting for me.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second, whatever.
Okay. Roll call vote. John? Terry? Sean?
Aye.
Myself, aye. We're adjourned 6:42. Thank you.
Really, thank you. If you come up with any other ideas, please reach